Hey, good evening. Good evening. I'm Cindy Baker. I'm the creator of the 3P Power Program, which is a group coaching program for entrepreneurs and other creative professionals who have ADHD symptoms. So, if that is you, you are in the right place. And if you are watching live, say hi in the chat. Let me know that you're here. If you're watching the replay, just say hashtag replay. And I'm going to pull this up here on my phone just to make sure that I'm streaming. Okay, I do see me and hear me. So I think we're good to go. A little tech check there. So we're going to talk about a topic that I think is very applicable to many, many people, and that is perfectionism. How perfectionism and ADHD interact and what you can do about it. So, um, if you hear something that you agree with, just whatever platform you're watching on, I would love to see your comments and your questions and emojis, whatever. That would be awesome. So, tell me if you're watching live, just say hi, tell us where you're watching from. And if you're on the replay, say that as well. So we're going to talk about how ADHD and even if you've never been diagnosed, if you just kind of think maybe you have it, how that influences perfectionism and what you can do about it. I mean, the question is your need for perfection affecting your productivity? That's really what I'm getting at, because it's great to want to do well on the things that you do. Um, but unhealthy perfectionism, it can just drive us to exhaustion because we strive to reach our own unrealistic expectations. And it's really a form of obsession. Some perfectionist traits can actually be caused by your ADHD. It can be a way to try to, I've seen people try to like overcompensate for all the ways that they feel like they've messed up in the past, or maybe for um, overcompensate for not feeling good enough, just feeling not good enough. And perfectionism results from a need for control. And I know we don't like to be known as a control freak or anything like that, but that's where it comes from. So it's worth taking a look at. Um, an overwhelming fear of the uncertainty that can exist in uncontrolled situations, right? That's what we have. And it can lead a person to adopt these paralyzingly rigid roles, almost like armor against all of the uncertainties that you're going to face in life. And perfectionism, it's like a defense, and it can become a defense against the chaos of being impulsive and our weak executive functioning. That's the part of your brain that handles things like memory, organization, planning skills, things like that. That comes with ADHD. So letting go of perfectionism, it does not mean that you're going to eliminate all of your worries around mistakes and failures and judgment and all that kind of stuff. It just means that we're going to accept that they're part of life for everybody, and mistakes can help us grow. And perfectionism is really just this unhealthy obsession with flawlessness. It causes people to set unattainable standards for themselves. They compare themselves to others. How many of you end up comparing yourself to others and feel sometimes like not quite good enough? I'd love to know in the chat if that's something that you guys can relate to. So again, if you are watching live, let me know in the chat. And if you're watching the replay, let me know. I see Nikki from Iowa. And I think some others are on, but they're too shy to say anything. So just introduce yourself. I can't see you. It's okay. Just tell us where you're from, and let us know you're alive and kicking. And anything that you agree with or resonate with, I would just love to know that. It just kind of helps um, it just kind of helps me know where to go with this talk. Okay, so being a perfectionist, uh, and and listen, I'm speaking from experience. Okay, I have the big letter P on me. I've really struggled with perfectionism. I'm way better now. Now that I've developed this framework for success with ADHD, but I can relate to a lot of this. So perfectionism can make us overly super sensitive to criticism. I can remember uh, being just paranoid over uh, what do you call it? Evaluations in jobs. Well, everybody has them, you know. That's part of your job is you have to get evaluated by your supervisor or whatever. But I was just so uh, thin-skinned. I couldn't take, even if it was constructive criticism. I was so sensitive to it that I just dreaded it. I didn't want anybody to know that I wasn't perfect. Well, duh. Guess what? They do. They know. They know you're not perfect. They know I'm not perfect. And when you're like that, it just increases anxiety and all these other mental health conditions. That May is Mental Health Month, so it's a good timing for us talking about it. According to the APA, which is the American Psychological Association, perfectionism is that tendency to demand of others or of ourselves extremely high or even a flawless level of performance. And this is what they talk about um, in their definition, is that it's above and beyond what's required by the situation. So it's a little extreme. Nowadays, we would say, "Oh, you're so extra." That's what I say to my fellow teachers who just want to have like perfectly cut out little decorations all over their room, and they're always doing all this extra stuff. And I'm just like, what, really? Um, it's just like above and beyond. And sometimes that's great, but when it takes a toll on your health, it's not great. So there's some strong connections between ADHD and perfectionism. And like I said, it could be overcompensation for past ADHD related mistakes, because a lot of times we embarrass ourselves sometimes with things that we do that are related to ADHD, or maybe we have feelings of inferiority. And for other people, it's kind of a form of self punishment, or even like procrastination, because it's about incorrectly estimating the demands of the task, or the situation or whatever. Um, how else can I say it? Like misunderstanding when to let things go and not being able to assess the resources to help you cope with the perceived challenge. So it's like we get ourselves all in a wad, in other words, worrying about not being perfect and people finding out that we're not perfect. So, anybody relate to this? I'm just curious. I got to look. I can't see your comments here. Lisa from Florida. She said you're describing me. Hi, Holly. Yeah, Holly's one of my former coaching clients, and great to see all of you. So, um, okay, so being less of a perfectionist, it starts with self-awareness, you know, like a lot of things, and adopting strategies to get rid of patterns of anxiety and negative self-talk. And that's a lot of what I cover in my coaching program. Um, but perfectionism, it can manifest in different ways. So let's talk about some of those, because I think this, like I said, awareness is the first step. So understanding how it can show up in your life will help you recognize whether this is something that you deal with or not. So all or nothing thinking, that's the first way. That's a fixed or rigid mindset. So In other words, you mess up and you make a mistake, and you think it represents a personal, unchangeable flaw. You know, it's like, uh, I made a mistake, so I'm a failure. It's all or nothing. Um, Another way is just setting unrealistic standards. Being ridiculously hard on yourself and other people. Um, Being too picky, uh, instead of being able to just let things go. Having difficulty making decisions because you're so worried about it being the perfect decision. Ooh, am I stepping on some toes here? I know I can relate to some of these. Avoiding commitments. Um, Avoidance and procrastination and perfectionism are all intertwined. Um, you miss out on opportunities sometimes because you're waiting for perfection, a perfect circumstance. Um, I know people who've missed out on joining my coaching program because it wasn't the perfect timing, and they didn't have um, the perfect financial surplus that they thought they had to have to join, and they missed the opportunity. Whereas I could have helped them with their time and their money, but you do miss opportunities sometimes because of perfectionism, and just a general unhappiness. Because you're always going to be letting yourself down if you expect yourself to be perfect. Um, People are perfection who are perfectionists are guarded in their relationships, so a lot of times they're lonely, or they get hurt easily. Got constant worry and rumination. Rumination is like, where your brain just loops over and over the same thing. Comparing yourself to other people negatively, feeling like you're not good enough, criticizing yourself, being, negative self talk, uh, living by the shoulds. You know, I have a Southern accent, so I'll spell it for you: SHOULD. Yeah. The shoulds, uh, and the ought tos. Living under that shame. And like I said, procrastination. Um, the procrastination comes because you want to avoid failure. And so you're afraid that you're going to fail, so you don't do it, or you don't want to be uncomfortable. So they put off tasks. Excuse me. Fear or reluctance to ask for help sometimes, because then people will know that you need help, and that would imply that you're not perfect. Excuse me. Overly sensitive to feedback. In other words, being really defensive all the time, being easily discouraged if something's not didn't turn out exactly like you wanted, and being worried about what people think. Fear of social rejection, kind of a low self-esteem. Um, so I imagine that you can relate to one or all of those things, because you're probably not watching this unless perfectionism is something, it's a topic that you were interested in. So let's talk about the different types, because I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I'm going to talk about three main types of perfectionism. There's kind of that self-oriented. Um, that's that's the type of perfectionism that's associated with unrealistic, irrational standards for yourself, kind of like punitive self-evaluation. That type of person is vulnerable to mental health issues like generalized anxiety, maybe depression, eating disorders. Um, and so that's like the self-focused. And then you've got the socially prescribed perfectionism. That's the that type of perfectionism. That's like associated with beliefs that other people are harshly judging and criticizing you. So it's not so much what you think about you, but you're worried about, you imagine that other people are judging you. So you may think that you got to be perfect to get approval, or acceptance from other people. And that can also be connected to social anxiety. But then you've got the self-focus, the social, and then the other oriented perfectionism. That's when you want other people to be perfect. So you that's associated with imposing like rigid, unrealistic standards on other people. And people, you know, do you like to be around that kind of person? People with that type can evaluate other people critically and often without forgiveness, with no empathy. And as a result, they're going to struggle with all kinds of relationships. And at its core, perfectionism is related to anxiety, really. Anxiety doesn't like discomfort, it doesn't like uncertainty. So, anxiety tries to make the resulting feelings of fear and worry go away immediately. Like they just can't handle it. Um, so it's really a dysfunctional way, and it's not very effective. Like as a coping mechanism for handling anxiety. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm allergic to everything in the month of May. So perfectionist people, they try to avoid any kind of possible disappointment. They try to avoid potential embarrassment. They try to avoid inevitable punishment or judgment due to making a mistake or failing. So to prevent stress and then reduce insecurity, they make these rules, and they might not even be conscious of it, but they're creating and imposing rigid standards that they must meet to feel worthwhile. So if you've ever had people say, you're too hard on yourself, you might be one of these people. Has anybody ever had? Let me see in the chat. Anybody ever said you're too hard on yourself? Um, Just put in the chat if you've ever had people say you're too hard on yourself. Um, because these high, like difficult to meet standards, they end up fueling more anxiety. You're feeling anxious, so you create the rules, and then you can't meet the rules, so you feel more anxious, and it's this vicious cycle. And if you are an adult with ADHD, the rates of anxiety disorder can be as high as 50%. Isn't that crazy? And symptoms tend to be more severe when ADHD is involved. So, anxiety and perfectionism are linked. Did you know that? Um, Maybe you've been trying to treat the anxiety. Instead, let's take a look at the perfectionism, because the perfectionism is fueling that anxiety. So let me see what you guys are saying. You're saying absolutely nothing. Come on now, people. I don't know. Maybe you're commenting on other platforms. I'm only looking at my Facebook group right now. Lisa said, yep, but easier on others. Yeah, we're always harder on ourselves, aren't we? Because we're going to be rejected if we spoke to other people the way our brain speaks to ourselves. Sometimes we wouldn't have any friends. So think about how you're talking to yourself. But again, anxiety and perfectionism are linked. So there's some things that they have in common. They've got that fear of failure, fear of disappointing other people. People who are living with ADHD, a lot of times they have moments when they know they're struggling or they've missed the mark in some kind of way, but they don't know how to fix it. And that just creates a lot of worry that leads to chronic low level anxiety. The perfectionism comes from, um, just trying to avoid unpleasant or embarrassing outcomes, right? We don't want to be embarrassed. We don't, and so we're constantly trying to be perfect and running on that little hamster wheel. Um, and the thing is, everybody else is doing the same thing. They're worried about what you think. um, so another is setting unrealistic or impossible standards of performance. A lot of people with ADHD blame themselves for things that are not their responsibility, or they maybe they made a mistake and they just beat themselves up for a small mistake when they did 10 things right that day. Um, Another way it shows up is all or nothing thinking. That's like, some people call it black and white thinking. Um, they think, well, if it's not perfect, it must be a failure. It's like perfect or failure. There's nothing in between. Really, that sets you up for a lot of disappointment. Um, Constant comparison to other people. People with ADHD compare themselves to people that don't have ADHD, and then they feel like they're less than, or maybe they're made to feel less than by other people. And then we're sensitive, hypersensitive, a lot of times to criticism. And then sometimes that just intensifies the level of rejection sensitive dysphoria, or they call it RSD. Um, that's a subject for another time. But if you are struggling with perfectionism, then you're going to be easily discouraged. Any kind of setback, and you're going to feel discouraged. Whereas other people might just let it roll off their back. Um, and it's hard to start again, especially when that initial motivation was so hard to get going to start with, and then um, you have a setback, and it makes it 10 times harder to start again. Um, and you might have heard some people will brush off compliments, you know, um, oh, that's a pretty dress. Oh, this old thing, in the South, we do that a lot. Uh, it's rejecting praise, or believing that you don't deserve success. In business, we call it imposter syndrome, right? We just shrug it off as luck when we're successful instead of taking credit for it. And it's depending on other people for validation and approval. Um, so, ADHD and perfectionism share the trait of anxiety, and they also share that trait of procrastination. That's another topic for another day. But, putting things off, that's a big challenge for people with ADHD. And if something seems really hard, or like it's going to take a lot of effort, or it's boring, like, we just procrastinate, you know? And so we don't start doing something because we're waiting for the perfect ideal situation. Idealistic conditions aren't in place, so we just don't start. And so we've got these special conditions, and we think if those things are in place, it's going to limit mistakes and reduce future, I don't know, shame. I guess shame is what we're afraid of. And so we avoid things. We put things off, and then we lose our confidence, and it just cycles. And sometimes we do put things off, um, and we're getting things done, but they're not the most important things. So the first thing to do about it is just to build awareness. Um, Practice mindfulness. When you're feeling like you catch yourself with this perfectionist thinking, kind of step back and sort of look at yourself as if you were outside of yourself, and look at yourself with like an investigator, like a detective, with curiosity, and ask yourself, what standard are you trying to meet, and why? What's the underlying worry? And then how can you shift that? What's going on mentally or psychologically before the perfectionism? Is it that you need to feel accepted, that you need to feel good enough, you need to feel praised? Um, a lot of times that's underneath perfectionism, and it goes along with having ADHD. And you got to address that imposter syndrome, that fear of failure and shame. And, you think, I would be so embarrassed if people found out that I'm not really as together as I appear. Um, Well, a lot of people join my coaching program over others because I don't try to pretend like I'm perfect. And they can relate to that. I tell you what didn't work and what's working now and what's worked for my clients. And I'm honest about things. But some people with perfectionism, they think if I mess up, I'm a bad person. Um, that sound familiar? We make mistakes and we expect judgment or humiliation or rejection. And maybe we got that growing up. And that creates this false belief that somehow there's something wrong with us. And that goes along with the ADHD. So you got to be aware, you got to talk supportively to yourself. I mean, instead of saying I made a mistake, I'm a failure, say we all make mistakes. This does not mean I'm a bad person or a failure. I'm trying my best. Sometimes it's going to work out, sometimes it's not. I'm going to learn from it, and shift your focus. Pay attention to what's working instead of what's not working. And notice the good that you do as much as or more than you notice the challenges. Um, that's one of the big things about my coaching program. It's called the 3P Power Program. And the first P stands for positive, prepared, productive. Because research shows that gratitude reduces negativity. Gratitude fosters that positive outlook that you need to overcome perfectionism. You got to learn to enjoy the small wins, the small achievements, just as much as the big ones. And I know that's difficult for a perfectionist because you're always wanting to discount any success you have. Well, yeah, I did this, but I didn't do that. But you did this. You know what I mean? So you're going to learn to set accurate expectations for yourself. Um, and if you start appreciating the little things, you're soon going to notice that they add up to like a bigger sense of self worth. You got to stop comparing your insides to other people's outsides. Um, you got to avoid the compare and despair. Social media, I got to be on there so people know about me, but sometimes it's a temptation to feel bad about myself because I don't look like a supermodel, um, like some of these other people that post on social media. Well, I'm comparing uh, like just regular me to their best, like maybe the makeup artist or whatever. And you got to stop, if you're in business, especially, stop comparing your chapter one to their chapter 10. If you're just starting out in business, you're not going to be where somebody is that's been in business for 10 years or more. So a lot of people too hide their fears and their worries. You don't know what's going on with other people. So don't assume that they're in a better place because they look or act like more put together than you. Instead of looking sideways at other people, look back and think about how far you've come and look forward and see where you're going. I'm starting to preach now. But anybody relate to this? What are you're thinking? uh, thank you, Lisa. I don't feel like it, but I appreciate it. Uh, yeah, I think that it's so tempting for all of us to worry about what other people think, right? But listen, everybody makes mistakes. Even neurotypicals make mistakes. Theirs just look different. Know that learning and making mistakes, it's part of living. And if you've got a fixed mindset and you think that you've got some kind of something wrong with you if you make a mistake, change that. Have a growth mindset and think, okay, I made a mistake, and but I'm working on it, and I'm going to grow, and I'm going to change. Um, be kinder to yourself when things don't turn out like you want. Um, there's a lot more I could say about this, but I feel like I'm going kind of long. I usually try not to go over 30 minutes. But when you have anxiety, it erases your memories of success. So you got to keep track of that. Write it down, and look at it. Look at your progress. And when you're feeling discouraged, look at your progress. I do that in business sometimes. I think, well, just think about before I started my business. I mean, and look where I am now, and I'm not where I want to be, but I'm further along, Um, and so when you have feedback, just try to accept what you hear with grace, consider the source, and then decide if it's something that you want to keep or throw away, um, and just learn from it and let it help you grow. Determine if there's truth to it. How can this feedback move you forward in your life? And your goal is to stay present, avoid defensiveness, and stop that shame spiral that's triggered by critical feedback. Apply what makes sense to you and then throw the rest out, and be realistic with your goals. Um, think about what you can handle rather than what you wish you could do. You know, um, uh, Gosh, there's so much more I could say about all this, but um, anyway, I'm going to stop there. There's a lot more I could say, but wanted to see your what your questions are, and I also just want to make sure that you're all signed up for this weekend's challenge. It's free. It's the Chaos to Control challenge, which is going to be held in the Facebook group, um, the Professionals with ADHD Facebook group. And it is going to be all about how to get control of your time. So if that's something that you struggle with, um, do tune in. You can upgrade. I would highly encourage you to upgrade to VIP. It's only $17, and you can get on Zoom, which is much more fun. You get a lot of bonuses when you do that, and then we'll be able to talk face to face instead of just like right now. It just says Facebook user on some of these comments. So make sure you sign up. The way you sign up is just www.chaostocontrolchallenge.com. Chaostocontrolchallenge.com. I'll put that in the chat in the Facebook group, but if you're watching on another platform, chaos, CHAOS, and then TO, controlchallenge.com. So it's Saturday morning. There's two parts. Saturday morning is 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern. And then part two is Sunday evening, 6 p.m. Central or 7 p.m. Eastern. And yes, it's Mother's Day, but hey, you can take mom to brunch after church, and then you can invite her to come with you to the Chaos to Control Challenge that evening, right? And there will be replays available, but they'll only be available for 5 days afterwards. And it's just much more fun on Zoom. It's much more fun live. Now there are prizes, and there's little assignments, little pre-challenge assignments going on all week in the Facebook group. So you want to participate in that. I'll be giving away gift cards, and it's just going to be a lot of fun. So I hope you can join that. And any questions you guys have or any last comments? Thank you, Lisa. Yes, I really do value honesty. I'm going to be honest. It's scary to be honest. I'm going to be honest. It's scary to be honest because, there are other ADHD coaches, and I worry, oh, well, if I let them know that, the real me, then they might not want to work with me. But what's happened is like the opposite. People want to work with me because they know that I'm not going to tell them something that I just read in a book. I mean, the strategies that I share actually work. They work for me and they work for my clients. And if it's something that I just read about and I've not tried it, then I always say, now I don't use this technique, but I do know that other people with ADHD really like blah, blah, blah. And I will say that. I think that's so important. There's a lot of there's just a lot of weirdos on the internet. And so I always try to give these little free trainings so you can get to know me. Um, Honestly, let's be honest. I hope that down the road, if it's the right fit for you, that you would want to work with me as your hire me as your coach. But even if you don't, uh, it helps me to just be me so that I can stand by my reputation. Some people are drawn to that. Some people are drawn to me because they know I'm a person of faith. Others, they know I was an educator for years, a school counselor, so they like that. So whatever it is, I just try to be me, and that's what you should do too. And let the chips fall where they may. I don't mean like have no social skills. Work on yourself, improve, try to get along with people, but don't try to put a lot of your emotional energy into being somebody that you're not. And that's the whole philosophy that I have, is that I believe that your ADHD is not a mistake. I believe you were created the way you are on purpose, for a purpose, and that your brain is just wired a little differently, and you have gifts to offer that other people don't. And so the key is just figuring out how to work with your ADHD instead of fighting against it, trying to be somebody that you're not. So give up that perfectionism and, take the next imperfect step forward. Um, I always say, take the next messy step. And what I mean is, it may not be perfect. Just do it. Done beats perfect every time. So, I hope that was helpful. And I hope you come to my challenge because it's going to be awesome. Not because of me, just because of the content. And we're going to have a lot of fun too. So, hope you have a great night. And I hope that was some Monday motivation for you. See you this weekend at the challenge. Chaos to Control Challenge.com. Bye.